Overnight, Russia lost nearly a fifth of its oil export capacity, not to missiles or submarines, but to drones assembled for a fraction of the cost. Fires climbed through pipelines, tankers leaked hundreds of thousands of barrels, and within minutes, Primorsk port was silent, a $70 to $80 million daily drain on Moscow's war chest. What makes this story shocking isn't just the financial blow. It's the fact that Russia's most defended corridor, packed with S-400s and radars, was breached. How do you crack an untouchable fortress? Ukraine just showed the world. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Before the missiles even cut through the night, the port was already smoldering. Tankers staggered in the water, their hulls lit with violent orange. By dawn, Primorsk looked more like a battlefield than Russia's gateway to global oil markets. Pumps stood silent, power lines sparked across the dockyards, and slicks of thick crude fanned out into the Baltic. What once carried hundreds of thousands of barrels a day had become a graveyard of black smoke and broken steel. From higher ground, stacks of flames rose above the skyline, the light visible for miles. Russia's morning began not with news of victory, but with the soundless emptiness of a system designed to never stop, suddenly still. It was a shock because the port wasn't ordinary. For Moscow, this corridor was the spine of energy shipments, a cornerstone of keeping tankers bound for Asia and Europe moving. Nearly 1 out of 5 barrels shipped overseas funneled through those cranes, pipes, and berths. The money tied to that route didn't just fill state accounts. It underwrote the network of ghost fleet tankers that moved oil under sanction and guaranteed Moscow the hard currency keeping its war effort running. To the Kremlin, Primorsk wasn't just a map coordinate. It was an artery they believed could not be cut. And yet, within a few strikes, 4 tankers bled out in the water and cranes sat frozen. The fortress image didn't match what officials saw on the ground. The port was ringed with overlapping systems, radar masts, layered batteries, the imposing shields of S-400 interceptors meant to swat down intruders long before they reached the approaches. Commanders believed nothing but a strategic bomber assault could touch it. But officials staring down at the crippled tankers that morning were confronted with the opposite. Twisted pipelines flooding yards in puddles of oil, drenched pumps blackened from fire, steel cranes bent at their bases, unable to lift a single hose. The corridors that once buzzed with dockworkers and pipeline crews now ran empty. Scraps of metal littered sites where million-dollar pumping stations had been running hours before. For Russia, the damage wasn't just visual. By the hour, tens of millions evaporated. Estimates ranged between $70 and $80 million in daily revenue lost so long as operations stayed offline. That translated instantly into a chokehold on downstream industries. Refineries docked of supply, shipping lanes forced to reroute in search of safer loading points, and banks waiting on energy payouts left in limbo. All of this played into budgets fueling Moscow's military. Each burning tanker and broken pipeline wasn't just a photo of destruction. It represented less ammunition produced, fewer wages for soldiers, reduced leverage abroad. And while ground crews wrestled with the damage, the official story out of Moscow told a very different picture. State announcements boasted of intercepting more than 200 drones over the night, crediting their defenses with a flawless shield. The claim painted the attack as largely foiled, but scorched dockyards were proof of a failure that could not be hidden. Every crane collapsed across its tracks. Every coupler valve left gutted was a counter to the narrative. The contrast between what officials explained and what their own dock workers lived through only deepened the sense that reality and rhetoric had parted ways. When senior officers finally laid their eyes on Primorsk, the scope of loss became undeniable. The oil terminal, rather than an untouchable zone, had turned into a symbol of vulnerability. It wasn't just another strike. The blackout across the port signaled to both allies and adversaries that Moscow's most defended corridor was not beyond reach. And that leaves a single pressing question. How could cheap drones bypass elite defenses and tear open a channel Russia had sworn was impenetrable? 70 tiny blips appeared across Russian radar screens one night. Too many, too close, moving in odd patterns. Out of context, they looked insignificant, not like jets or missiles, but scattered dots weaving just above tree lines. Yet those faint echoes would punch a hole through one of Russia's most secure corridors. What made them impossible to stop was not their size or speed, but the strategy behind them. Ukraine had crafted this attack for months, waiting for the exact moment $200 million worth of Shadow Fleet tankers docked at Primorsk. The timing wasn't chance. The swarms were lined up in sync to strike not only the port, but the financial structure holding up Moscow's black market shipments. Kiev's planners knew Russia's radars weren't designed to detect objects crawling at treetop height. They knew S-400 batteries were meant for air superiority targets, fast-moving jets, heavy strike aircraft, cruise missiles arcing in high. They were never engineered to waste million-dollar interceptors on cheap, expendable drones zigzagging low and erratic. So while Russia watched for large threats to show up clear on their screens, Ukraine cued drones that could sneak in under the sweep of scanning beams until the horizon itself masked them from view. By the time operators spotted them, it was too late. Not all drones sent that night were equal. Some were decoys, programmed to light up radars and lure interceptors in the wrong direction. Others, electronic warfare platforms, carried jammers that pulsed interference against guidance radars, forcing a scramble to recalibrate targeting systems. And buried among the noise were specialized Bober ERS. These weren't built to distract, but to strike key nodes with precision. Their trajectories were set days earlier, locked by digital maps that allowed them to clear forests and rivers while clinging to low elevations. The mix of decoys, jammers, and strikers ensured that no single defensive algorithm could filter threat from background. The launch itself was a feat of coordination. 70 separate units had to ascend into the night sky within a narrow window, not all from one base, but dispersed across Ukraine. Each site had its own crew, its own calibration, and near real-time communication to feed timing updates. Imagine the complexity of organizing a night where dozens of pilots, mechanics, and operators scattered hundreds of miles apart had to sync watches, launch, and steer machines through invisible corridors. Any wide delay would disrupt the wave pattern, and the Russian grid would slice them one by one. Yet the launches rolled with precision, spreading the drones evenly so they would crash against defenses all at once. Navigation was mastered in advance. Terrain maps had been loaded into guidance systems, giving each drone a pre-built route that hugged ground clutter. That meant radar lost sight of them until they climbed for final approach. By then, Russia's systems weren't prepared. Operators panicked, watching screens swarm with confusing data. In desperation, the S-400 batteries fired. Dozens of million-dollar missiles surged skyward, chasing noise signatures and fragments of jamming. Many detonated in empty patches of air. Electronic blasts from Banshee-type drones blurred signals, making it hard to distinguish shadows from real drones. The frenzy wasted ammunition while leaving the core strike group untouched. Losses were expected. Dozens fell to SAM fire or electronic disruption. But this was never about preserving the swarm. Attrition itself became the doorway. Every decoy struck meant one less interceptor available when the final group appeared. Out of 70, only 7 mattered. The assassins. These were programmed directly onto pumping stations, critical valves, and docking infrastructure tied to loading arms. With the layers of defense diluted, they reached Primorsk intact. Explosions followed not at random, but cascading across systems designed to keep fuel flowing. So Ukraine achieved what fighters and missiles could not. They turned 70 drones into a key that unlocked Russia's most protected port, crippling it at the moment Moscow's Shadow Fleet depended on it most. And if a corridor shielded by high-end interceptors can be torn open by swarms designed for pennies on the dollar, what does that say about the future of warfare itself? The strike on Primorsk wasn't just about shattered pipelines or burning ships. It proved that billion-dollar fortresses can be broken by patience, coordination, and assets built for a fraction of the cost. Expensive defenses did their job against traditional weapons, but they weren't designed to handle waves of small, unpredictable threats that never stopped coming. the lesson reaches beyond one port. It raises a harder question. Will future battlefields be shaped by overwhelming firepower or by smarter, cheaper tools that slip past every shield? Consider that. The balance of power may now rest in swarming innovation, not size or spectacle.